Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenborough, and in today's podcast, I'll be looking over the game against Norwich City by bringing you my match review, player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you interviews with Roy Hodgson, Andros Townsend, Martin Kelly and Jordan Ayew after the game. So let's begin. Crystal Palace overcame a visiting Norwich City side 2-0 on Saturday afternoon, with a dominant performance recording their sixth straight league win without a defeat at Selhurst Park. Luka Milivojevic was the man who gave the Eagles their first, slamming home from the spot for his opening goal of the season, before Andros Townsend added a second in the final few minutes. After a blistering 25-minute start, Palace eased their foot off the gas somewhat for the remainder of the afternoon, but managed to pin back the Canaries to ensure their threatening attacks weren't fed enough to trouble. In Roy Hodgson's own words, Palace, staff, players, fans at all were reeking from the shock of ceding 2 points to Wolverhampton Wanderers last Sunday, and began the afternoon's clash with Norwich clearly inspired by the disappointing draw. Almost from kick-off, Wilfried Zaha exhibited his threat to the visiting Canaries, bursting into the box on the right wing and blazing the ball just high and wide with barely a minute shown on the clock. The Eagles came close again moments later with Zaha, who looked energised from the off, intercepting a mishit Norwich pass to lay off Jordan Ayew. 20 yards out and allowed time to shoot, Ayew unleashed a thunderous effort towards Ralph Farman's goal, but the second choice keeper was equal to the strike. However, Farman couldn't keep out the knocking Palace for much longer, and when Ibrahim Amadou heavily fouled James McArthur in the box, the keeper faced one of the league's most lethal spot kick specialists. On his 100th appearance for the club, Milivojevic stepped up coolly as ever and, for the first time this season, rifled home high to the right of the net and handed Palace their opening goal, a deserving reward for their fearsome start. In the process of stretching for the ball, Farman injured himself, becoming Norwich's second sideline goalkeeper of the week after prematurely returning from a groin injury, and was replaced by Northern Line international Michael McGovern. Both shot-stoppers were making their Premier League debuts on Saturday. Norwich sought to respond to Palace's swift lead through their talisman Timmy Pukki. Latching on to a long punted ball downwards, Pukki raced onto the home side's ball and, under pressure, fired over the bar with the help of Vicente Gaeta's fingertips. Roy Hodgson's men were unfazed by the chance, however, and burst to the other end of the pitch moments later, where Jeffrey Slutt whipped across the box to Ayew, who stretched to reach the passing ball in vain. With a game better balance after Milivojevic's opener, Norwich squandered another chance when Jamal Lewis laid off from wide to Todd Cadwell, only for the midfielder to place his strike into a muddle of bodies, one of which, Martin Kelly, blocked the effort. Further chances fell to the visitors, and Gaeta was forced into routine action to punch away an Emilio Benner strike wide, before the ball ended up in his own net following Pukki running it off slightly off-field a moment later. Palace's instructions for the second half seemed to mirror those displayed in the first, and the Eagles laid siege to the Norwich box as they hunted an insurance policy second goal. Chances fell to Ayew, who was well denied on the turn by Amadou, Zaha, who had been denied by the visiting defence, and McArthur, whose 20-yard strike screwed just over the crossbar as those watching at SC25 drew a sharp collective breath. In spite of their dominance, Palace couldn't replicate their first half success, and Hodgson sought to change their approach by bringing Townsend on for Cheku Kouyaté in the 70th minute, moving Slap into the middle for Townsend to threaten on the wing. The Eagles' re-energised efforts almost doubled their advantage when Gary Cahill powered a downwards header towards goal, only to hit Ayew, who couldn't find a target on the turn in a tight space. Zaha was next to hunt the cushion his side needed to ease Selhurst Park's natural anxieties, but the tricky Ivorian headed over with aggression from 10 yards. Hodgson's final change was something of a more volte-face from the first, removing Ayew in favour of Max Meyer, shoring the side up for what seemed to be a nervy 5-minute close. But it was the manager's initial substitute who settled the game for Palace, as Andros Townsend slotted home after some fine work from Zaha to hand the Eagles an insurance victory after 45 minutes of desperately seeking it. Sharply contrasting Sunday's heartache at the final whistle, Selhurst Park on Saturday erupted upon Jonathan Moss's shrill call for play to finish. So now I'm going to move on to my player ratings, but before I start, don't forget you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Crystal Palace for all the latest Palace news. So if you are someone like me who does like to follow a vast array of Palace accounts, whether that be on Twitter or Facebook, do of course head over to the respective sites and follow our accounts there. Now obviously alongside sort of your general Palace news, whether that be sort of about injuries, about the press conferences, and of course any other sort of ongoings, whether that be about the academy and obviously the stadium development, which, you know, not much we've heard of lately. And obviously, so if you do want a place to get all that sort of latest Palace news, of course follow our accounts there. But also alongside that, we obviously keep it up to date with transfer news. So even though we're not in a transfer window now, there's going to be numerous rumours coming up until January, and of course beyond that as well. So if you are someone who wants a place to get all the latest Palace news, plus all of the transfer news as well, keeping it up to date with all different articles, all different sources, of course, you know, once again follow our pages there. And of course alongside that, sort of your interviews as well and our opinions. So, you know, if we find a really interesting interview, whether that be with a player, with management, or with anyone really connected to the club, and of course in terms of opinions, you know, us giving before the game, our predictions after the game, giving that instant match reaction. So if you are someone who wants to get involved in that, with the interviews, with the opinions, with their transfer news, and obviously the general news as well, of course head over to the respective social media pages and of course follow us on there. Now, a great place for you guys to share your opinion is of course in the YouTube comments. So if you are listening to the podcast on YouTube, obviously feel free to drop a comment below the video with your player ratings, obviously where you're rating a player's performances from 1 to 10. And obviously, like I say every week, the reason I want you guys to do that is just so I can read through your comments, see, you know, and really compare how you thought the players performed to how I thought they performed. And of course, based upon that, we can have a discussion as to, you know, which players should play next week. You know, should we play a little bit differently? Should a player be in a different position? All different things like that we can discuss. So of course, if you do want to get involved, of course feel free to obviously drop the comment below, of course, with your player ratings. And even if you don't want to do that, or you obviously are a Norwich fan and you find yourself on the channel, obviously comment below with your general views of the game. So whether that be your thoughts on the lineup, how we played, the thoughts on the goals we scored, or just sort of general thoughts about anything else you thought I might have missed throughout the game, of course also feel free to obviously share your opinion there. And you know, it's not only so that I can read it and see what you guys thought of the game, it's also any other fans, whether they be Palace or Norwich fans, they find themselves on the channel, they can obviously listen to me, read the comment section as well, and obviously leave their own comment, but actually read what other guys thought about the game, you know, not just about players, but obviously the overall performance as well. And of course, like I've said already, it is a really great place for you guys to share your opinions. So of course, you know, feel free, if you've got any questions, you've got anything you want to ask me, of course feel free to do that below. Now, before I go on to obviously the player ratings, there's one stat in particular, or two stats, that I really want to talk about, and it really just goes to show, you know, how well we're playing. Certainly towards the back end of last season, but coming into this new season, even though we had that horrible, or we've had two horrible losses, obviously the Sheffield United one and of course the Tottenham one, you know, obviously the Sheffield United one we just played terribly that day, and obviously the Tottenham one we played terribly and Spurs were so good. So aside from them games, we've had a fairly good start to the season, and obviously this stat really, or these stats really link in well. So of course we're now unbeaten in our last sort of home run, or we have an unbeaten home run, which is now 6 games long, and that's the first time since 1993 that we've actually managed to actually have that unbeaten home run, which runs to 6 games. So the fact that we've actually, you know, we're now on our best unbeaten run at home just goes to show, you know, how we've sort of turned that home form around. Because, you know, last season we always like to complain we're not good at home, we're all about playing away, but actually, you know, 6 games unbeaten at home, first time we've done it since 1993, really just goes to show, you know, how we've improved that home form. And of course, in terms of this season, you know, we've kept 3 clean sheets this season. I think it's tied with Man City and West Ham, I think. So the fact that we actually got more clean sheets, or we're level on clean sheets with, you know, other teams in the league, goes to show how good our defensive performances have been this season. And, you know, once again, bar the Tottenham game and bar the Sheffield United game, obviously our defence has been fairly solid this season. So once again, these two stats really for me just resonated for me, you know, this sort of performance, and certainly how we've been playing over the last sort of few months or so. Because, you know, unbeaten at home, you know, in 6 games, longest, or the best run since 1993, just goes to show, you know, how we're improving that. And of course, you know, we know how good our defence can be, but the fact that we've had people like Kelly, we've had Sacco, we've had Cahill, we've had Dan, so the fact that we've had quite a big combination of different defensive partners over the last sort of 7 games or so, the fact that we've managed to keep 3 clean sheets as well as just being solid defensively overall, just goes to show, you know, how good as a whole, I suppose you could say, that the team is defending. Now obviously I might as well now move on to the player ratings, obviously starting to go with Vicente Gaeta, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now obviously, just going back to that stat about a clean sheet, once again, another clean sheet for Gaeta. And I think it's, every sort of 2 or 3 games or so that Gaeta has played for Palace, we've ended up getting a clean sheet. So that just goes to show how good he is defensively. Obviously, I'm not sure exactly the stats and the numbers to do with it, but I think it's something like every 2 or 3 games he plays for Palace, he gets a clean sheet, which really goes to show how good he is defensively. But I've given him a 7 here for the game at the weekend, because I think quite early on he was forced into a real number of saves, and the fact that he obviously made these saves, good saves at that, obviously kept us in the game. We obviously got our penalty, made it 1-0, and obviously going into the second half, just keeping Norwich out for the rest of the game is of course what you'd expect from him, obviously, but the fact that he done it so well is obviously what I was really impressed with. And I think, you've got to look at that first half performance in particular and go, that was just a solid performance, nothing spectacular, but he was forced into a number of saves, done what he had to do, which of course was great to see. Now, there was a slight scare, obviously he knocked a dead ball into his own net, but like I've said, aside from that little thing, it was a decent, sort of solid performance overall. And I think it was sort of, the ball had gone out and then Gaeta sort of dropped it and it went across the goal line. But, that I'm not really going to dwell too much on that. That's just a silly sort of moment in the game. And I suppose something that people have been picking out is the fact that, how much more confidence he gives us than Hennessy does. And, I don't really want to sort of berate Hennessy more than I have to, but the fact that Gaeta's performed so well this season, and obviously all the other games he's played for Palace, that is something that people are now bringing up and going, actually, yes, we're playing really good defensively as a unit, but the difference that Gaeta makes to the team is so vast. You can just see the impact he makes in the fact that he's so good in terms of, giving that confidence to the back four, as well as obviously his goalkeeping and saving ability. But, like I've said, the fact that he dropped the ball through his legs, even though when the ball went out of play, aside from that, which of course, every goalkeeper sometimes just drops the ball or whatever, but aside from that, a really solid performance, particularly in that first half, keeping it at 0-0, and then of course keeping it at 1-0 as well for Palace, which was of course great to see. And once again, going back to that stat about clean sheets, the fact that he's played all our games this season in the Premier League, and the fact that we've kept more clean sheets, or I keep saying more clean sheets, West Ham and I think Man City are drawn with us, but still, the fact that we're up there for clean sheets this season is obviously credit to the back four, but also to Gaeta, because the back four's changed a lot. We've had people changing positions throughout the season, and Gaeta's been that main man who's always been there. So the fact that he's performing well is of course great to see. But once again, not really much more I can say, other than the fact that I think a 7 is a fair result. Particularly a good first half, and just carried on the rest of the game, keeping out Norwich, restricting their chances. So overall, a very decent showing from the Spaniard. So I'm now going to move on to the first player in our defence, and that is of course the right back Joe Ward, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now, in terms of Ward's performance, much like Gaeta's, there isn't really too much to talk about, mainly because he'd done his job in the side, nothing spectacular, nothing terrible, and certainly made up for that, that little error he made at the end of the Wolves game, obviously leading to us conceding right at the end. So the fact that he came back, new game, fresh chance, and just done what he had to do was of course good to see. Now, one of the reasons I've given him a 6 is that Todd Cantwell was one player in particular that obviously Ward had to deal with, and the fact that he dealt with him relatively well, given the fact that he liked to play sort of a roaming role rather than being in one set position. He seemed to move quite a lot across the pitch. The fact that Ward was able to just sort of match that and obviously, basically restrict Cantwell to as little chances as possible was of course great to see. And the fact that he held his position as well, so even though he was roaming and he was moving into all these different positions, the fact that Ward obviously tracked him but still managed to stay and hold his position in the side and keep that sort of defensive solidity that we had in our back four was of course great to see. And obviously aside from that man marking of Todd Cantwell, I think he just defended well on the whole, really, because anything that was thrown at him, he dealt with it relatively well. But like I've said, nothing spectacular in the game, but this is what you want to see from your defenders. You just want to see a really rugged performance. You do what you have to do and help us, see the game out. And, the fact that we've got yet another clean sheet, you've got to look at players like Joe Ward and go, yes, these weren't spectacular, but your sort of contribution defensively, albeit just doing the basics, was obviously why we were able to get the clean sheet. Because if you make mistakes, you don't play that well, that's when the mistakes can creep in. So the fact that we've got someone here who, even if he's not he's unspectacular, just does the shift and does a job for the team, was of course great to see. So once again, not too much more to say other than I think a 6 is a fair result. So I'm now going to move on to the first of our two centre backs, and that is of course Gary Cahill, who I am going to give an 8 overall. Now, in terms of Cahill's performance, this is yet another performance where I've been so impressed with him. And considering I was sort of 50-50 as to whether we should sign him in the summer, 100% now it was the right decision to sign him, because we've seen the quality, we've seen the experience, we've seen obviously the game knowledge as well that he brings to the side. And this was a performance yet again where he done that, albeit against a sort of I wouldn't say a lesser opponent, because Norwich have played good this season, but in terms of what you would expect, on paper you would think Wolves would be a hard game. So the fact that he done alright against Wolves, but done equally even better, against a Norwich side which on paper shouldn't be as good as the Wolves side, was of course really good to see. So the fact that he just steps up to whatever the opponent is, does what he have to do, and always does it to a high level, was of course great to see. Now, in terms of when he was on the ball, bringing the ball forward and just defending well, maintaining possession, I think he was very composed, and that's something you like to see from your defenders. And when you consider someone like Timmy Pukki, I know Norwich as a team play quite high up the pitch, but when you've got Pukki just running at you constantly, trying to win the ball off of you, trying to nip it off you, trying to cause you to make a mistake or do a loose back pass, when you've got that pressure from the opposition, you need someone like Cahill just to be composed, do what he has to do with the ball, maintain possession, spread the ball out wide. And that's exactly what he did, which of course I was impressed with, because I could talk all day about his defensive work, because that was of course really good, but the fact that main part for me in terms of beating that press that Norwich normally play, the fact that it was his composure, his ability on the ball to obviously circumnavigate that and play well, was of course great to see. Now, once again, in terms of going forward, I think he was very composed in terms of bringing the ball out from the defence, and that just allowed us to play slightly further up the pitch, because at the end of the day, that's how you're going to beat a pressing team. You're not going to beat them by sitting back and trying to absorb the pressure. If you actually try and bring that press back to them and try and play 5-6 yards further up the pitch, obviously that's going to give you a little bit more opportunities, I suppose, going forward, because obviously you're nearer to your attacking players. But also it's obviously going to put the opposition under pressure, because of course they've got to sort of retreat their sort of high pressure they were playing overall. Now, obviously there were a few times where Norwich put a few balls in behind and he didn't look quite as assured as maybe he should have, but then on the most part he dealt with everything that Norwich threw at him. So that's why really I've given him the 8, because of that composure on the ball, because of that quality he showed, and obviously the experience as well to bring that game management in and just help us to obviously in the first half see out that 1-0, and obviously going into the second half just to help us hold on that 1-0 for us eventually to get the 2-0. So the fact that he showed his composure, his quality, and of course the experience as well, was of course great to see. And like I've said, yes, he may have been exposed, let's say, by a few balls in behind, but at the end of the day, Norwich weren't really able to do much off of it anyway, so I don't think there's too much more really to look into that. But once again here, another impressive performance from Gary Cahill. Certainly, the awards and the nominations have come out for the Player of the Month. He's certainly got to be up there for September, because he's been a fantastic player for us, obviously, during the month, being very crucial to obviously all of the points we picked up. So if he does go on to win it, which I think it's sort of between him and maybe Gaeta, whoever does win it fully deserves it, because defensively both of them two have played really well this season. So I'm now going to move on to the second centre-back, and that is Martin Kelly, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now, in terms of obviously Martin Kelly, obviously Mamadou Sakho got injured in the last game, which of course obviously sparked the debate who would come back into the side, whether James Tompkins would come straight back in after his injury, or whether Martin Kelly, who started the season and of course went back onto the bench for Sakho to return, and of course has made his way back into the team, whether he should obviously start in his absence. And of course he did, and he's certainly done a relatively good job, hence why I've given him the 7. Now, I suppose the thing we've once again got to talk about with Kelly is just the fact that he shows actually the depth that we've got at centre-back, in the fact that we could drop, someone like Sakho gets injured and we can bring in someone just as capable in Kelly, or even, Tompkins, who of course was on the bench. The fact that we've got these options is obviously good for us, but the fact that someone like Kelly, who, he didn't have the best of starts to his Palace career, obviously when he was playing at right back and obviously when he was playing at left back, so the fact that he's now developed into this role over the last sort of 2 seasons or so, and actually has made it his own, he's basically, our sort of 3rd/4th choice centre back now, is obviously great to see. And it's really nice to see someone who's a really good squad player, in the fact that they're very happy to help out the team, but when called upon they can really make a difference to the side, and that's certainly what I sort of got from Kelly's performance here. Now, in terms of his overall performance, I think he defended very, very well with the what was thrown at him from Norwich. And once again, going back to that high press, it's really difficult to deal with, obviously, because you've got people like Pukki constantly putting pressure on you, but also you've obviously got players from wide positions, obviously trying to put balls in behind and allowing people like Pukki to get on the end of them and run through your defence. So the fact that Kelly actually dealt what was with in front of him was really great to see. Whereas I think that Cahill sort of dealt more with the sort of under pressure moments in terms of getting the ball out of play, whereas Kelly was there to make the blocks, make the challenges, and basically just make life difficult for the Norwich attackers. So I think you've got a really nice combination there between Kelly just doing his overall defensive work well by making the tackles, making the blocks, and obviously being able to deal with what's in front of him, where I think Cahill was the guy who was put under a little bit more pressure, but that's because he was doing that work of maintaining possession and obviously allowing us to go further forward. And like I said, when the ball was played over the top, yes, Cahill didn't do that great with it, and certainly balls from out wide. But the fact that you've got someone like Kelly there who can obviously sort of mitigate that sort of weakness, I suppose, in Cahill's performance was of course great to see. And it once again goes back to that point about being a good combination. The fact that Kelly and Cahill can work so well together that Kelly can do just the basic defensive stuff well, whereas Cahill can be that guy to use his experience and sort of knowledge of the game to obviously know when to drive forward and of course to do it effectively was of course great to see. But once again, I think he's fully deserving of the 7 and certainly another clean sheet. And I think out of the games Martin Kelly has played this season, I think he's been involved in all 3 of our wins, I think it is. So the fact that you've got someone like Kelly, who's obviously not your first choice but is dependable when called upon, the fact that we have a really good winning record when he's in the side just goes to show how much influence and impact he of course can have on the side. So once again here, Martin Kelly fully deserving of the 7 I've given him. So now I'm going to move on to the final player in our back 4, and that is the left back Patrick Van Aanholt, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now I suppose what you've got to look at his performance is the fact that he's an improvement on recent weeks, certainly not back to his best, but an improvement nonetheless. Now time and time again throughout the game, obviously in terms of our attacking threat, quite a lot of it came from Van Aanholt down that left hand side, and that was just down to him actually picking up the ball from the defence, someone like Cahill or Kelly just distributing the ball out wide to him on the left, and he would be the guy to actually link the defence to the attack by driving down that left hand wing, whether he'd be looking for the overlap or looking to cut inside or looking to have a go himself. He always found himself in them really advanced positions, which was really great to see because he bridged that gap between the defence and the attack really well. Now of course, obviously towards the first half, because he was playing so well early on, obviously he put the pressure on, and he really felt it towards the end of that first half because he made a few sort of mistakes here and there, and obviously they were poor clearances, and that was just because Norwich were piling on the pressure. So the fact that he was dealing well with the pressure, in terms of getting the ball forward, and he'd done the attacking side of his game well. Obviously the pressure towards the end of the game, Norwich are 1-0 down, trying to get back into the game, that obviously caused him to make a few mistakes. But in terms of my performance, I think we've got to look at it and go, it didn't really cost us anything. So I think overall the 6 is a fair reflection, obviously, of that attacking work, but also just on the whole, because yes, it was a few poor clearances here, but on the whole he defended all right. Now, one thing I did pick out, and this is something that quite a few people have started talking about, is obviously the fact that maybe he misses playing with Slupp or Townsend on, whichever wing they're playing on. Obviously sometimes Slupp plays on the left, or he can play in central midfield, but he's always playing on the left. And of course Townsend, even though he primarily plays on the right, he sometimes comes and covers on the left as well. So I think someone like Van Aanholt could really benefit from just having Jeffrey Slupp play a little bit further left, just because he helps them out, he gives them that little bit extra protection, and just gives him that option when they're going forth on the overlap. And I really do think Slupp and Townsend could be players that actually Van Aanholt does miss, because in terms of his play, or when he does play at his best, it's because he's got that support from obviously the players slightly more advanced from him. And I suppose particularly when Wilf is on his flank, obviously we know that Wilf more sort of recently likes to play a little bit more central, only because that allows him to get chances in and around the box. So what I think would be better is that yes, obviously Wilf could help Van Aanholt and be an option on the overlap. I just think it'd be far more effective with someone like Slupp working with him, or even Townsend, just because even though Van Aanholt, this game was an improvement on recent games and he was getting forward, he just doesn't seem to have that confidence like he used to have in terms of just making loads of runs in the box, cutting inside, having loads of chances, whereas now he seems to be able to carry the ball forward, but then once he gets to that position, he doesn't seem to know what to do with it next. And I think that's a really good point that certain people have picked out. But once again here, Van Aanholt obviously playing on the left-hand side. Time and time again, in terms of our attack and play, he was heavily involved in that. But I've only really given him a 6 because he wasn't necessarily that effective in doing that. And of course, towards the end of that first half, particularly when Norwich were putting on the pressure, he obviously made a few poor clearances. But the fact that he made up for that with a very competent performance for the rest of the game, and once again quite crucial to us getting that clean sheet by just restricting and basically counteracting that Norwich press, was of course good to see. So once again here, Patrick Van Aanholt, the left back, fully deserving of the 6 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to the first player in our midfield, and that is our captain Luka Milivojevic, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now in terms of obviously Milivojevic's performance, we can talk all day about the penalty and how good it was, but actually towards the start of the game I think there was a few questionable parts of his game where of course he could have done better with, and that was in terms of his deliveries, because aside from obviously when he had that opportunity to score the penalty, I think he had quite a slow start to the game, and in terms of him getting the ball forward and in terms of his set pieces, some of them were quite questionable in terms of the deliveries weren't quite there, weren't hitting the men they were supposed to, and of course weren't really in good areas where we could do anything with it. But the fact that even though he started the game quite slowly, the fact that when he had the opportunity, he took his opportunity, and then obviously after that done what he had to do, just remain solid in the midfield, was of course great to see. And in terms of the penalty itself, I might as well go on to it. Obviously, we know that's a penalty. MacArthur's been taken down inside the box, taken out from behind. The referee didn't even have to think twice, obviously gave the penalty. And of course, the penalty itself is so good. Obviously, we know how reliable Luka is from the penalty spot, but the fact that he got so much power, so much accuracy to actually get it into that top right corner, as well as timing it just right, so the goalkeeper, even though he did dive the right direction, couldn't actually get a hand on it, was of course great to see. So of course, even though he started the game quite slowly, he obviously more than made up for that with the penalty. The quality of it in terms of the power, the accuracy, the placement, everything about it was really good. And it goes back to what I've been saying last season, just him being reliable and just having someone in the team who can score a penalty was of course great to see. Now of course we did start the game quite well, but the fact that we just had that boost from going 1-0 up just helped us to see out the game until half time. And looking at his overall performance aside from the penalty, I think particularly when we got 1-0 up, he was the guy to make sure that everyone was in check. Everyone was obviously making sure that we could actually withhold that pressure that Norwich were putting us under. So the fact that we had someone there, Luka, who obviously started the game quite slowly, but once he got going, he was commanding the side, making sure everyone was in check, making sure everyone knew where they had to be, as well as obviously dealing with that pressure and allowing us to sort of counteract that pressure that Norwich were putting us under, was of course great to see. And I suppose one of the only real negatives is the fact that he obviously got booked in the game, and obviously that means he's now up to 5 bookings, I think it is, so he's going to miss the game against West Ham at the weekend, which of course is a little bit of a disappointment. But then again, sometimes you've got to take one for the team, and the fact that we've come away from the game with a 2-0 win, you're going to look at it and go, actually at the end of the day we won the game, doesn't really matter. But it could be a big difference in the West Ham game next weekend, only because he's played so well. I think he hasn't played great this season, but he's starting to get back to his best. And then obviously he's suspended for the game, which is a little bit disappointing. And just a game like this, where even though he started the game poorly, the fact that as soon as he got that chance, he took that chance, and that seemed to sort of push him on a bit, was of course great to see. Now obviously towards the end of the game, he obviously was fairly solid, done what he had to do to keep us in the game, but he was quite noticeably tired actually towards the end of the game, and that's quite, I think it's quite normal. Obviously you see people like MacArthur and Ayew in particular, players who look tired towards the end of the game, but it was quite noticeable with Milivojevic in the fact that he was a bit sluggish towards the end of the game, a bit slower, but that didn't really affect his game, because as a captain, as a professional as he is, he just carried on, done what he had to do, which of course was great to see. So once again here, the captain, Luka Milivojevic, fully deserving of the 7 I've given him. Obviously didn't start the game that quickly, but once he got into the game, once he scored that fantastic penalty, and once that sort of boost he got from that allowed him to allow us to sort of counteract that pressure that Norwich were putting us under, as well as just being solid and helping us see out the rest of the game, was of course good to see. So once again here, Luka Milivojevic, fully deserving of the 7 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to our second midfielder, Cheku Kouyaté, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now, in terms of Kouyate's performance, I think we sort of mainly want to talk about the first half, because I think he made a real impact, let's say, in that first half, just because of how effective he was in that midfield, in terms of obviously containing that high press that Norwich play, but also just his general sort of midfield play, offensively and defensively, I thought was really, really good as well. And I suppose the phrase to use is box to box, because I do think his performance, if you're looking at that first half in particular, it truly was a box to box performance, because he was covering both that defensive aspect of the game, but also the offensive part as well. Now, obviously, in terms of the work we were doing down the left-hand side, obviously I talked already briefly about Van Aanholt and the fact that, yes, he was getting forward, but he was missing that final sort of bit of quality, when he got into these positions. And actually, Kouyate was one of these players who actually was trying to get down that left-hand side, trying to link up and bring other players around him, trying to sort of bring the team overall forward. And I do think, in terms of maintaining possession, I think Kouyate done a great job in terms of carrying that ball forward, and not just bringing the ball forward and maybe losing it, but doing it so well and so effectively that we were able to do something off the back of it. Now, obviously, in that first half, he was so impactful, arguably one of our better players, just because of that impact, that tenacity, the energy he showed from the off. And then sort of the second half was sort of the juxtaposition of that, let's say, in the fact that he was a lot quieter, and maybe that's just down to the fact that he played so well in that first half, so much energy from the start, that maybe he was just a bit worn out by the second half. But whatever it was, just how impactful he was in that first half made the difference, allowed us to get that 1-0 lead, and obviously, in terms of carrying it on and keeping it at that point until we scored the second goal, I think he done a fairly good job there. Now, obviously, he still wasn't at his best, even though it was a good performance by his standards, he still, there were a few parts of his game lacking, and, normally he's got that tenacity, he's got that ability, to actually carry on and not really get tired towards the end of the game, whereas this game wasn't quite his best, just because in that second half he did look quite fatigued, quite tired, and maybe not necessarily as good as he has been previously. Now, obviously, maybe not everyone does agree with that, but just me looking back at the game, I'm thinking, he wasn't at his best, maybe that's a possible reason why he wasn't. But the thing that is that even when he isn't playing great, the fact that he's still able to put in challenges, put in strong tackles, and just do his all for the team, even though he's not playing great, still, make these contributions at really key points in the game, which of course allow us to sort of build up, I suppose, to get chances from the game, was of course great to see. And it is, good to see a player who's not necessarily going to be playing at his best, but still can do a job for the team and still does the basics right. Much like what Joe Ward's performance, in the fact that he done a shift, done what he had to do for the side. It was much more of the same for Cheikhou Kouyaté here, particularly in that second period. So I do think the 6 overall is a fair result. So I'm now going to move on to James McArthur, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. In terms of McArthur's performance, obviously he's one player who I think people say quite a lot, when he didn't play against Tottenham, he did miss his sort of contribution that he brings to the midfield. And obviously I talked last week about the Wolves game and the fact that, McArthur made the difference in that game from the Tottenham game. So it was nice to see, once again, I've given him a 7, and that's just because he carried on from the Wolves game and actually, making his place in the team count, showing actually why he should be one of the first names in the team sheet. And really, realistically, you're looking at the start of the game, much like Kouyaté, I think he started it really well, from the off, trying to counterbalance that Norwich press. I think McArthur's one of these players. He may not be the fastest, but he's got that ability, he's got that energy to deal with it, and I think he's done that really well. And one of the reasons I think he done so well with that is just because of how much ground he covers. Now, obviously, I've talked already about the energy that he has, but just the sheer amount, whether that be out wide, whether that be further forward or going back, and, wherever he had to be on the field, he had that movement, he had that ability to cover a lot of ground, which of course was really effective for us in terms of counterbalancing or counteracting the Norwich press, because if you've got someone who can cover all areas of the field, that obviously gives you that extra sort of ability to stop Norwich in their tracks. And I think that's something in particular that McArthur done well, hence why I've given him 7. Now, to be honest, obviously he covered a lot of ground, and as a result of that, obviously meant that he was able to win the ball quite a lot. So not only was he covering a lot of ground to actually stop Norwich, but actually when we had the chance to go forward, wherever he was on the pitch, because he was covering a lot of area, he was able to drive forward and actually, help us win the ball and obviously keep it as well. And, quite often, quite a lot of our attacks were started by people like Kouyaté and McArthur in the midfield, winning the ball from deep and driving forward. So it's really nice to see, you've obviously got players with the energy, but when they put that energy to good use by driving forward and making really good sort of or creating and starting great attacks out of it was of course great to see. Now in terms of the penalty that Milivojevic obviously converted, obviously McArthur was quite key to that in terms of he was the guy who got fouled. Can't really debate it, the player's taking him out for the back rightly as a penalty, so of course nice to see once again McArthur contributing, even though you don't intend to get fouled. The fact that he was in the penalty area in the first place is obviously good to see, good movement in that respect. And I suppose, unlike Chiarte, who obviously sort of his performance dwindled as the game went on, I think McArthur was the complete opposite. He kept that intensity up for the majority of the game, particularly in that second half, obviously when it was still 1-0, sort of a knife-edge result. The fact that he kept going, kept that intensity high, obviously kept covering a lot of ground to obviously allow us to win the ball back or to drive forward as well. So the fact that, McArthur done what he had to do in his midfield role, whether that be offensively or defensively, to obviously stop Norwich and keep them quiet, was of course good to see. And I do think he fully deserves the 7. And this is a performance where yet again he's proving why he is one of our main players in the side. And we've talked quite a lot, in the last sort of year or so about whether we should be playing Max Meyer instead, because obviously he's got that quality, he's younger. But the fact that McArthur, once again, week in, week out, keeps proving his worth to this side is, really sort of proving that he's sort of an underrated player now by Palace fans, just because, he just does a shift for the side, does what he has to do. And sometimes it goes unnoticed, but this game in particular, he was really impressive, particularly in terms of stopping the quite high press sort of forward play that Norwich did bring to us. But once again, fully deserving of the 7 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to one of our first players in our front three, and that is of course Jeffrey Schlupp, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now in terms of Jeffrey Schlupp, I might as well start with his position on the field. Obviously I say as part of a front three because of course him, Zaha and Ayew were sort of up top throughout the game, but of course there were parts in the game where Jeffrey Schlupp sort of drifted into the midfield, and obviously when Townsend came on, Townsend went wide, and Schlupp came obviously further down the middle. So of course in terms of our formation it did sort of change throughout the game, but in terms of the starting 11, Schlupp's sort of main role was primarily on that left hand side, and done a fairly decent job, hence why I've given him a 6. Now in terms of who he was meant to link up with in the game, I think Chiarte and Vanana were obviously two players obviously playing on the left, Vanana in particular, but Chiarte is one of these players you normally see him a little bit more central than he was playing in this game, but I just think him linking up with Jeffrey Schlupp and Vanana just gave us that another option down that left hand side. So it was good to see obviously that Chiarte and Vanana were down that side, but the fact that Jeffrey Schlupp playing quite high up on that left hand side obviously had the support from these two other players seemed to help his performance. And yes, it may not have been the best Jeffrey Schlupp performance, but nonetheless a solid performance, done what he had to do for the team, and certainly the way he linked up really well with them two players was of course great to see. Now like I said, towards the end of the game obviously there wasn't really anything of note, but towards the end of the game, obviously with us sort of trying to cement that 1-0 win, and of course went on to get a 2-0 win, obviously at that point we obviously brought on Andros Townsend just to give us a bit more fresh legs up top so we could at least try and get that second goal, which ultimately Townsend did. And of course in doing that, it obviously meant that Jeffrey Schlupp played a little bit more deeper in midfield, obviously in the latter stages of the game. But because obviously Jeffrey Schlupp, he's got that energy, he's got that tenacity, got that physicality, and obviously he's also got that attacking intent as well as the defensive intent as well. The fact that he's got these two things obviously allows him to be a perfect player in midfield, because obviously towards the end of the game you want to keep it secure and keep it solid at the back, which he's done, and that's obviously using his defensive side of his game, and of course the offensive side of his game, getting forward quite a lot, at least trying to push on and get that second goal, which ultimately we did, even though it didn't come through him. But the fact that we got into that position in the first place was of course great to see. So nothing really major of note to talk about Jeffrey Schlupp's performance, and that's why I've given him a 6, but just a solid performance all round, linking up well with the players around him, and the fact that he was once again versatile in changing positions, playing more central as the game went on, was of course great to see. So I'm now going to move on to the right hand side, and that is where Wilfried Zaha was playing for the majority of the game, and I'm going to give him a 7 overall. Now what you've got to look at with quite a few of our players' performances, obviously a few players started the game really fast, and sort of as the game wore on, sort of their influence dwindled, and Zaha was sort of the opposite of that, where he may not have obviously he looked good from the start, but he wasn't quite clicked into gear early on in the game as he was later on in the game, when he was causing absolute havoc for the Norwich players. So obviously the start of the game is a little bit slow, but he had that initiative, and obviously people may not agree with me, but I think considering other players from the off were constantly running at Norwich, I think that Zaha was one of these players who give it 15 minutes and then he was at his best. Now, he obviously, the thing that I liked and one of the reasons I've given him a 7 is just the fact that he took that initiative in the early stages of the game. So whilst there were other players around him who were more attacking, and I know what I've just said sounds a bit silly in the fact that he didn't start the game as quickly as the others, and he still took the initiative, so he was still good. Probably started the game as a 6 or 7 out of 10, but there were other players who started the game even better than he did. So I'm not saying he had a bad start to the game, I'm just saying in comparison to other players, and I've made it sort of difficult for myself now to explain, but nevertheless took the initiative in the early stages of the game, which of course was good to see. And obviously that's sort of all involved with him obviously looking to carry the ball forward, always looking to threaten. And even though he didn't look at his rapid best, and I suppose that's the point I'm trying to make, even though he didn't look his best in terms of when he was running at defenders, it didn't look like the chances were there, but the fact that he had the initiative in the first place early on was of course good to see. But once he got into the game, and this is what I'm trying to sort of emphasise, is that yes, in the early part of the game he didn't look at his rapid best, but once he got into it there were loads of chances. He was forcing the goalkeeper, I think it was Farman at the time, to make saves. So the fact that he's getting into these good positions, running in behind, and rather than trying to cut inside, he's just having the goal on his right foot, trying to at least get it in, far corner or near post, whatever the opportunity he found himself in. The fact that he was looking to do what he could do with the ball was of course good to see. And of course you've got to look at the penalty that we obviously scored, and obviously McCarthy was the guy who got fouled for that, but actually it was Zaha who made a run down that side of the pitch, whipped the ball in or passed the ball to McCarthy, and of course McCarthy was the one who got fouled. So whilst that doesn't count for anything, I like to call it a pre-assist, and it goes to show that even though he wasn't directly involved in that first goal in terms of being the assist or being the assister, having that assist, the fact that actually he was the guy who he was the architect really of that chance, and the fact that he was the guy who actually got the ball to McCarthy in the first place was of course good to see. And it really just goes to show, yes, he may not have started the game as well as he should have, but once he sort of got back to his rapid best, and he had the initiative already, but once he got back to his rapid best, that's obviously when he was good, going forward. And of course in the second half, obviously once again we were 1-0 up, we want to try and get that second goal. He obviously had a really battling second half in terms of trying to get at Norwich whenever he could, running down either flank he was on. And I think he was up against Lewis for the game, and I think it was a fairly even match, but I think Zaha got the slight better of him on a few occasions, but nevertheless a really good attacking performance in that. And of course, to end the game, he actually finally got a proper assist, and that was obviously for Townsend's goal to make it 2-0, kill the game dead, which of course was good to see. And obviously I can talk about Max Meyer in a minute in terms of his ability to carry the ball forward down that left hand side and then pass the ball to Zaha. So whilst Zaha's dribbling past 4 players and then just sort of putting a lovely placed ball for Townsend to obviously score that second goal. Yes, that was great, but actually the work from Max Meyer as well was good. But Zaha done the main work in terms of finding himself in that position, getting past 4 players, and then releasing the ball to Townsend. So the fact that he capped off what was a really good, really solid defensive performance, with the fact that he was able to get the assist to add upon that pre-assist that he got for the Milivojevic penalty, was of course great to see. And like I've said, yes, he hasn't scored yet this season, but he's finally getting a few assists under his belt, and the goals will come because of course every good attacking player will get their chance to do so. But it's nice to see him actually finally getting back to his best, because obviously over the last sort of few weeks or so, particularly the sort of first few games of the season, with all the stuff that went on in the transfer window, all the stuff about AFCON as well, coming back late from that. So all these different factors added together obviously is why he arguably had a slow start to the season, but now he's starting getting back to his best. We're starting to see the quality he brings, and particularly with that assist for Townsend in terms of getting past four players and then just placing the ball perfectly for Townsend was of course great to see. So once again, Wilfried Zaha fully deserving of the 7 I've given him. Obviously the final player in our starting 11 was Jordan Ayew. Going to give him a 6 overall because this was sort of a standard Jordan Ayew performance where he was hard working, done what he had to do for the team, and yes, there may not have been anything really of note, any real quality or any real sort of chances I can talk about, but I've given him a 6 because of the hard work and just that sort of energy he brought to the side. Now, there was a really venomous shot he actually had from about 20 yards in the first half, and, you know, other than that, he didn't actually find himself in many goal-scoring positions, and that's not necessarily down to him not playing well. It's just because other players were obviously finding themselves in those positions. But in terms of that shot, that's the only real one that sticks in my mind. Really good opportunity from 20 yards out, but he hit it with so much power that it didn't look like it was going to go in anyway. But nevertheless, the fact that he got himself into a position where he could actually have a go from 20 yards, because most of our strikers don't seem to have any confidence. I say most of ours. We've only got like 3 strikers, you know, but the fact that we've got people who've actually willing to have a go, you know, if you're not going to get into the box, just have a go from 20 yards. That was of course good to see, albeit nothing came from it. But I think, you know, his best work, you know, you've got to look at his performance, was away from goal. So it wasn't about getting chances, getting in the end of balls, you know, looking to create chances for yourself and others around him. It was all about, you know, beating that Norwich press, you know, coming deep and just helping out the midfield players, as well as just being a distraction for the Norwich defenders. So rather than us just going with Ayew up top, Ayew might sort of distract them and allow someone like Wilf to obviously get the better of them. So even though he's not directly involved in some of the good work we had in the game, his influence, his energy was still felt in the fact that it allowed other players around him to play really well. So once again here, Jordan Ayew, not really much to talk about other than the fact that it was a hard working performance where he had a shot from about 20 yards in the first half. Other than that, not really much to talk about, but fully deserving of the 6 I've given him. So the 3 substitutions we made in the game were Andros Townsend, James McCarthy and Max Meyer. Now, in terms of Andros Townsend, he obviously scored the goal to make it 2-0, kill the game dead. He came on in about 70 minutes or so, so I'm going to give him a 6 overall. And I think the thing you've got to say with him is that he's had sort of an on and off season, had a few good chances here and there, a few good performances, but on the whole he's had a pretty sluggish start to the season. So it was nice to see him finally get back amongst the goals, but also just have a good performance. The fact that as soon as he came on the pitch, he took that initiative to obviously, you know, just try and get us that second goal, obviously, which he did, but just having that intent to go forward, the fact that he showed that intent, that pace to obviously try and beat the Norwich press, as well as obviously get in behind the Norwich back line, was of course great to see. And in terms of how we were playing as a whole offensively throughout the game, when Townsend came on, he sort of changed that dynamic, just allowed us to play a little bit more further forward, a little bit more pace than we would have had beforehand. And that was of course great to see. So it was nice to see, you know, a substitute actually come off the bench and actually make an impact. And I think we could talk about the 2 other subs as well, and they came on the pitch and also made an impact. So in terms of the subs, something that we normally criticise Roy Hodgson for, I think on this occasion he got it right, because with Townsend you brought on someone to give us fresh legs, energy. He obviously went on to obviously up our tempo, but also get the goal for us to win the game. And of course the other 2 I'm going to talk about, they came on the pitch just to help us see it out, and of course in Meyer's case obviously help us to go on to get that second goal. Now in terms of James McCarthy, came on in 79 minutes, obviously also going to give him a 6 overall. And even though, you know, when he was on the pitch he didn't have that much impact, the fact that he you know, the fact that he obviously just took the chances that he had to do, you know, the fact that McCarthy, you know, in terms of his chances defensively, in terms of making challenges, helping us see the game out, whatever he had to do off the bench, which you would expect from a substitute midfielder just to help us see out the game, that's what we got from him. So of course that was really good to see. And, you know, yes, he may have had limited impact on his time on the pitch, but, you know, at the end of the day, you've got to look at McCarthy and go, his job is not to make a real impact and to help us score loads of goals. He's there to make our midfield solid, help us see the game out, and that's exactly what he got from his performance. So once again here, McCarthy came on 79 minutes or so, fully deserving of the 6. And of course Max Meyer came on in the 90th minute, but had a real impact overall, so I'm going to give him a 6. And obviously it was his run down that left hand side, getting past a few players, releasing the ball to Zaha, and of course Zaha was able to get past a few defenders and obviously pass the ball to Andros Townsend. So even though Max Meyer was only on the pitch for a limited amount of time, just that effort and energy he had to obviously glide the ball forward and dribble past and release the ball to Zaha, that is obviously worth the substitution on its own. Because whilst you've got someone like McCarthy who is just on there to see the game out, Meyer obviously done that in the 90th minute, came on, helped us see the game out. But the fact that he also contributed by driving forward and just pushing for us to get that final goal was of course great to see. And I think he'd only been on the pitch like a minute or so, so the fact that he had that intent as soon as he came on the pitch was of course really good to see. But like I've said, all 3 substitutions, were really well timed. They came on at good points in the game, came on for the right players. So you've got to give Roy Hodgson credit, because normally we criticise him for his substitutions. But I think on the day, in terms of bringing on fresh legs, bringing on someone to obviously see the game out, and of course someone to obviously try and push us and just give us that final little push towards the end of the game, I think in terms of them points, I think Hodgson done relatively well. Now, in terms of the game as a whole, after what happened last weekend against Wolves, yes, we played well, but it was a bit disappointing to obviously draw the game, so 2 points lost in that aspect. So I think that it was nice for us not to finally concede a last-minute equaliser. It was actually nice for us to actually score sort of relatively in the last minute, to score in added time to obviously make it 2-0. So I don't think I would have survived a last-minute equaliser, in the fact that we already went through it last weekend with the disappointment about losing 2 points. So it was nice to see us have a professional performance where we got a goal ahead, then we got the second goal just to kill the game off, and that was of course great to see. And like I've said already, one of the reasons for that, it was the game management, and that was obviously right down to Roy Hodgson, making the right subs and just doing basically the simple things right. The game management is what lost us the game, or I say lost us the 2 points in the draw against Wolves. But this game here, we had the game management. Everyone knew what they had to do to contain the press of the opposition. And obviously the subs also played a crucial role. And I suppose you've got to look at the table. I think we're 9th now, level on points with basically, I think it's from 5th place downwards. But, it's early days anyway. But it's nice to see us in the top 10. And it just goes to show how well we're playing this season. Bar the Sheffield United game and bar the Tottenham game, the fact that we find ourselves in this position, 11 points from 7 games is a relatively good record. So the fact that we've played well and we're finally getting rewarded for these good performances, and the fact that we're correcting our mistakes from weeks ago, where of course our game management let us down, the fact that we're doing this just shows we're improving week in, week out. Obviously don't want to jinx it now, but it's just nice to see us actually finally rectifying some of the mistakes we've made in recent games. And what you've got to look at it is, yes, there were a few individual performances which were good and crucial to us getting the win, but it was just a great effort for the whole team working together to counteract that Norwich press. Everyone in the team, doing their defensive work, going forward, everyone's looking to get involved. So the fact that that happened in the side was of course good to see. And even people like Cahill were giving their contribution offensively by actually leading from the back, driving the ball forward. And having someone like Cahill in particular obviously makes such a big difference. But when you've got someone like him combined with other players who are giving their all, it of course adds to a really big combination. Now, in terms of next weekend, obviously a big game against West Ham, the TV game on Saturday. Obviously 2 clubs with 2 good starts to the season. Obviously West Ham's one is slightly a little bit better. Obviously I think they're 4th or 5th in the league at the minute. So even though we've both had relatively good starts to the season, theirs obviously has been slightly better. So it's going to be a nice London derby, really competitive. 2 good teams coming up against each other. Obviously West Ham have lost Fabianski to injury, so maybe that could be a plus for us. But we never seem to do well against West Ham in recent seasons. So realistically, we just need to up our game, continue what we were doing here against Norwich in terms of containing the opposition and just sort of putting pressure to counteract what they're doing to get chances in and around the box. If we can do that, we've got a chance. But then again, West Ham, like us, have had a good start to the season. Theirs is slightly better, so maybe they might get the better of us. But like I've said, if we get our game management right, if we get the subs right, if all of the people in the team obviously work together to counteract whatever the opposition that's thrown at us, if we can do these things right whilst keeping our defence as solid as it has been this season and just get a few chances up top, then of course it might be a good game for us, but also a good chance for another few points. So once again, we'll see what happens next weekend. So I'm now going to move on to my Man of the Match award. But before I do that and give you my Man of the Match and who I thought the biggest influence in the game, I'm now going to give you the 4 nominations I put forward for the award. Now obviously after such a good performance, arguably I could put basically the whole team on here in terms of everyone's contribution, and that's obviously including the subs as well, because as I've already discussed, people like Townsend and Meyer coming off the bench obviously made an impact there. But I think as a whole, I do think the 4 players I've narrowed it down to is obviously a fair reflection from positions across the field, but also in terms of their impact. Obviously these are players you can pinpoint exactly and go, actually, their contribution really made a telling impact in the game. And, you know, like I've said, there could be players who miss out here, which arguably people might put up there. But I think, once again, these 4 players are a fair reflection on the game as a whole. So I've gone with Frashenta Gaeta, Gary Cahill, Luka Milivojevic and Wilfried Zaha as this week's 4. Obviously, feel free to comment below if you disagree with it. But might as well start with Gaeta. Obviously, the reason for me that he's in there is, obviously he was solid, as he always is. But the fact that he was forced into a number of saves early on in the game, the fact that he made these saves, kept us in the game, and obviously allowed us to obviously protect our 1-0 lead, going into that 2-0 lead. You know, the 2-0 lead. So the fact that he was able to do that and just remain calm, remain that presence at the back like he always does, and the fact that he was able to just be solid overall was of course good to see. And it was another solid performance from him, but the fact that he was able to do it so effectively to counteract that press, the fact that, you know, he was able to deal with the simple things that were thrown at him, and even though it didn't make any spectacular saves, just doing the basic things right, and with them being so crucial as they were, is why I've put him forward for the award. Obviously, Gary Cahill playing at the back, very composed on the ball in terms of whenever we were under pressure from Norwich, he was able to deal with the ball well and clear the danger. But also when we were in position, he was able to carry the ball forward and be composed and, you know, be really effective with what he was going to do with it. So them 2 scenarios in terms of being composed on the ball, both defensively and when you're in an offensive position as well, was of course good to see, and particularly from the pressure from Timmy Pukki, constantly chasing down balls, putting the back four under pressure. So the fact that Gary Cahill didn't use his experience to not let that get the better of him and play well was of course good to see. And, you know, the fact that he just showed on his own that quality in the back four to carry the ball out from the defence, whether that be from the defensive perspective or the offensive perspective, obviously getting the ball forward. I think Gary Cahill executed that really well. Obviously Milivojevic, you know, fairly solid in the midfield, done what he had to do, but I put him in here just because of that phenomenal penalty. The fact that he got the power on it, the height on it, the position of it, and the fact that he got it in the right corner and timed it right, just right so the goalkeeper couldn't get there, was of course good to see. So the fact that when we were under pressure, the fact that he just, you know, took that opportunity to make it 1-0 whilst also helping us see out the rest of the game was of course great to see. And in terms of Zaha, the fact that he started the game, even though I said he started the game slowly, the fact that he had the initiative from the off and slowly got into the game, causing problems for the back four, was of course good to see. The fact that he always had that intent to obviously look to threaten at them at every opportunity. And yes, he may not have been at his best early on, but he soon got back to his best. You know, done really well to obviously exploit the space, particularly with the McCarthy getting fouled for the penalty. So the fact that once again on the flank able to get a ball into the area to obviously his own teammate, and of course they end up winning a penalty as well. So not only was it himself, you know, getting chances, having opportunities, forcing the keeper into save, but actually just that intent he had was allowing us to create chances for himself. And the fact that he topped off what was a good attacking performance with the fact that up against Lewis in the second half he done right, and the fact that he topped that off with the assist for Townsend's goal. Obviously a great one from Max Meyer, but obviously even better, you know, dribbling and run from Zaha to obviously get past the defenders as he did, and of course pass the ball to Townsend to score. So realistically, you know, all 4 of these players obviously deserve credit, and, you know, like I said, there could be loads more players who I could have put on here, and arguably there could be, you know, there's little reasons here and there why I could nominate any of the players. But like I said, these 4 players for me, you know, from positions across the field, as well as just having different contributions, which I think were quite crucial to us not only getting the win but also the clean sheet, is why I put them forward. But for me, there's only one clear winner, and that is obviously Gary Cahill. So congratulations, Gary. You don't get a trophy or certificate, but you do get my sincere congratulations on what was yet another solid performance from you. And for me, the reason I've given it to him is the fact that we got a clean sheet was mainly just down to his experience and just the quality he showed in the game. Nothing seemed to get past him, and when it did, he was able to recover well. And just in terms of that ball playing ability is something I was really impressed with. So for that, along with all of his other defensive work, is why he's won this week's Man of the Match award. Obviously, Gaeta, Milivojevic and Zaha, you know, closely followed up, you know, in terms of how I thought their performances did compare. But, you know, if you do disagree, or you do agree, I suppose, with my player ratings, obviously feel free to comment below. But, you know, like I said, I do think Gary Cahill is a worthy winner of this week's Man of the Match award. So now you've heard my match report, player rankings and my Man of the Match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got interviews with Roy Hodgson, Andros Townsend, Martin Kelly and Jordan Ayew following the game.
Andros, how pleasing to come on and seal the win?
Yeah, no, obviously delighted with the 3 points. It's been a crappy week for us, conceding in the last minute. against Wolves. So to be in that same situation with 10-15 minutes to go, only 1 goal lead, at times you fear the worst, but no, we dug out well today, and thankfully Wolf did a bit of magic like he usually does, and I was able to finish it off and and ease our fears for the last 5 minutes. But now it's good 3 points, and now we can enjoy the weekend and go again on Monday.
You came on late in the game. What were you thinking as you were watching it? Because Norwich didn't have any chance in the second half.
I think even as a forward-thinking player, when you're 1-0 up and you come on with 5 minutes to go, first and foremost you have to see out the win. You're the one with fresh legs. You have to help out the defence, track runners, all the ugly side of it. But now, thankfully, I got my chance in the box today, and I took it, and hopefully, I can build on that now and go on a little run.
What about this home form? Still unbeaten here so far this season?
Yeah, of course, we're pleased. Like you said, still unbeaten, but we're ultra critical. We wanted the 3 points against Wolves last Saturday. We're disappointed about that, but to keep the unbeaten record going is good, and we can take that forward now into the next few games.
And how difficult has it been for you recently when you've not been starting in the side?
Yeah, no, it's been difficult. It's not been a great start to the season for myself. I'm not hiding away from that. Just have to keep working hard. When I get my chance today, I have to take it like I did today and just be patient. And when that chance does come again, I'm ready for it.
Martin, congratulations on the victory. Started really well. Was that the plan from the start to come out so quickly?
Yeah, I think so. I think we had a game plan today to press from the front when we could, and not give the Norwich side any time when possible, when we was all set to press as a team. So that worked well at the start. We done that well first half. Lost our shape a little bit towards the end of the first half, but that happens from time to time when you lose the ball high up, and we got the result that we worked really hard for today for.
Did it take it out of the team a bit more fitness-wise, playing like that?
A little bit towards the end, but if you do it right and press, win the ball back, and then keep the ball, then you'd say it was easier fitness-wise. So we worked on the game plan all week. We put that into play on the pitch today, and it worked and got the result that the fans deserved.
Although it felt like a defeat last week, it's actually obviously 4 games this season, two wins, 2 draws at home. The home form seems to have improved a lot since last season.
Yeah, I think last week was obviously tough to take, having controlling the game for so long. We knew this week that we was in for a tough game with the form that Norwich was in. We played, the game plan really well and got what we deserved.
You've been involved, you started in all 3 of the victories so far this season. Obviously, in your time at the club, you've had times when you've been away for the first team a bit, but the past year you've been involved so much. How much are you enjoying your football right now?
Yeah, really enjoying my football. I'm in a great squad with a great set of lads. We're always pushing each other in training, through the starting 11 to the people on the bench, people who aren't, sometimes not in the squad, who are really training well. So it's a tough squad that's really robust, and when asked upon, you can ask anyone to step up, and in Roy's shape and Ray's, you can put on the shirt and do your job. So it's been good for me to get a run. Obviously I had the injury that I was gutted about, but came back fit with the medical staff, credit to them, and showed today that I haven't lost any fitness levels.
And back to the game today, just on that second goal, how much of a relief was it when that goal was scored that there was no situation like last week?
Yeah, big relief. I think you can work it out for yourself. If you give Wilfred the ball down the channel, there's 3 of them try taking it off him at one point. He's not getting it off him, was he? So it was always in our heads that we couldn't lose today. I think we worked for that, and then the little special moment that started with Patrick to Max, and then a nice ball down the line to Wolf and back in. And Ross with a great finish. It was well deserved to top off a good, hard-working week for us, and a good performance out on the pitch.
Gordon, you must be tired after that one. There's a lot of closing down right from the start.
Yeah, but most important thing, it was worth it, and we had that 3 points, so we're all happy, and we'll prepare for next week's game.
Yeah, what do you think the key was to the victory today?
I think from the start to the finish, we were the better team. and I think we closed them down really, really well. We were up the pitch, and that's why we got rewarded, and we managed to score our first goal. And after, obviously, they had a bit of the ball, we dropped off a bit, but we managed to get a second goal and game over.
Yeah, the first goal, penalty from Luka. Have you played with many people as good at penalties as Luka is?
I think Luka is one of the best, and he keeps on showing it every time there's a penalty. So I don't really know, but I think he's one of the best I've played with. Yes.
How happy is everyone in the dressing room today, especially after the difference with the game last week? Although it wasn't a defeat, it felt like it.
Yeah, we're happy, but we're like, oh, if we won last week, it would have been 6 points. But no problem. At least we have 3 points today, and we keep moving on. And next week is another big game for us, and we'll prepare ourselves very well in the week, and we'll try and get the 3 points next week.
We got the second goal today. It felt like the game was managed a lot better towards the end. How much did the manager talk about game management this week?
I spoke about it the whole week, and it was really important for us to manage the game well, because we had some few problems in the last 2 home games, and that was Wolverhampton and Aston Villa. But overall, I think we've been doing really, really well this start of the season, and we just need to keep going and keep correcting the little mistakes.
Right, how pleased are you with that?
Well, I'm delighted. I mean, I thought we started quite brilliantly today, really, and we looked as though we were going to sort of take the game by the scruff of its neck and sort of race into a lead. We luckily got the lead during that good spell, but they came back at us. You know, we thought before the game, I think I might have said to you before the game, they are a good team. They have some good players, and they know what they're doing, and they're very good in those tight situations. And I thought they came back, and it took an incredible block from Martin Kelly to keep us in the game at half time. But second half, I thought we tightened up in that area and got back a little bit to how we started. Not quite with the freneticism, because you can't keep up that pace of pressurising for 90 minutes. But I thought we got the balance quite right between the pressurising and the making certain that we screened things off. And our back four played a little bit higher, and we didn't really concede that many chances in the second half. And I honestly thought that we were going to put the game to bed a little bit earlier, because we had good possession, you know, from the centre of the midfield into the final third, but we couldn't seem to find that last pass or that last shot which would get us the goal. But luckily Andros came on, and you know, he's been desperate for a goal, and it's obviously upset him that he hasn't been able to get that goal in the early part of the season. So that's good too, that not only did we win the game 2-0, but Andros gets a monkey off his back in terms of not being able to score.
After last week's disappointment of conceding so late, do you have an extra large sigh of relief when he does score the second?
Oh yeah, we do, because that would have been a tough 5 minutes. I think we'd have probably done a slightly better job on it than we did the 5 minutes last week. I think, you know, from the short corner when it was still 1-0, that was a positive sign that we weren't just chipping the ball into their goalkeeper and seeing if we could defend it. But it was nice when the second goal went in, because I honestly didn't think then that in the 2 minutes remaining they would score 2 goals.
What about Luca's penalty? It was top right, almost unstoppable.
He's a good penalty taker, isn't he? You know, he doesn't have a particular side. He's capable of scoring on both sides of the goalkeeper, and he's been 100% successful for us. So it's good to have somebody that when a penalty does get awarded, you've got a good feeling that your man might just score it.
How pleasing is this home form for you? Right, so unbeaten this season, couple of wins, couple of draws.
Yeah, it's very pleasing, because last year we got the points, especially, you know, towards the end of the season, but so often we didn't play badly at home. In fact, quite often I remember standing here talking to you or other people after the game, and you know, getting sympathy really for the fact, well, you played well enough to win this game, but you didn't. And I think for your fans, it's quite important that they sometimes get the joy that we get when that final whistle blows, and they know that it's a win for their team and it's 3 points for their team. And there's no way really you can quantify how important that is. So when it's not happening, it's comforting, I suppose, that we're still getting points because we're having very good away victories, but it's nice when you can win the home games.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Roy Hodgson, Andros Townsend, Martin Kelly and Jordan Ayew had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against Norwich. But make sure to come back next week for my post-match review of the game against West Ham. So thanks for listening, and remember to up the Palace.